day, and that is the census has been extended until October 31st. So there still is time to get counted. Everybody must get counted. It's so important. So much federal funding depends on this for essential services to our fine city, which resides on Ohlone land. And we'd like to acknowledge the many Ramaytush Ohlone tribal groups and families as the rightful stewards in the lands on which we live and work here in the Bay Area. Today you are at Shade Gardening, a partnership with the California Native Plant Society. I'm Anissa. I am your librarian host today. I will be putting links in the chat box, as well as Bob from California Native Plant Society will help answer questions. What else? I think that's it, but I do want to share some things with you going on. I also want to let you know that San Francisco Public Library stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and working to end our own systemic racism in our organization and working towards racial equity in our city and beyond. And in the document that I put the link in and that I will put in again, it will have lots of resources to Indigenous culture and Black Lives Matter reading lists, all kinds of great links of, library stuff. So we are celebrating Viva right now, Latinx Heritage Month, and it spans from now through November 2nd. Lots of authors, lots of amazing art. I'm so excited. We are having Luis Rodriguez in conversation with Mr. Benjamin Bach Sierra, our On the Same Page author. He'll be, it's his book launch celebration for Planeta, and it's a long-awaited sequel. People love Mr. Bach Sierra. He's an educator, activist, works at City College, and just an inspirational person, and his book is so good. So please check that out, and if you don't know Luis Rodriguez, you should know him. Amazing author, and just I'm mind blown that I get to promote such amazing people. Sunday, we partner with tomorrow, Sunday, Silver Linings of Staying in Place. We get to get artists from Mexico and all over the place, really. We've been really fortunate. And so we partner with the Mexican Museum to bring you Daniel Lozama. It's gonna be a really amazing talk. His paintings are stunning. Lots of other Viva. We just added this last minute partnership with the DeYoung to hear about the Frida Kahlo exhibit. I'm gonna breeze through a little bit of this. Local artist Calixto Robles will be giving us a nice little history and story of his experience with Day of the Dead. And this will be in Spanish. So come and practice your Spanish. We'll be partnering with the Bay Area Science Fest, and we just added the California Native Plant Society to the lineup. So find out. We have a landing page that just launched on Friday, so you can find that on our website. Our One City, One Book this year is Chanel Miller's Know My Name, and it's actually not this year. Time has been stunted. It is going to be launched on March 2021 is our main event, so look for that. We suggest you buy the book or check the book out now. It's a pretty heavy topic, but super important. And Chanel also just, the Asian Art Museum just opened up a beautiful mural triptych that can be seen from Hyde Street, the big new glass enclosure that they have installed. It's gorgeous. And so we'll also be featuring some of Chanel's art and maybe a Chanel Miller exclusive library card. So we're excited about that. And what? Take your census. It's so important. It's an act of resistance. It's an act of activism. It is, I know it can be scary for some people just dealing with anything government-wise, but your voice counts, you matter, everybody counts. It's not, babies count. So please tell everyone to take their census. 6 locations now, you are able to pick up library materials, and mid-October we'll be adding, I wanna say 3 more to that lineup. So we're trickling open and starting to get back. Speaking of that, of our trickling open, please mask up and definitely take care of my library family who's working out there in the streets and serving us and working at food banks and working at hotel sites, working at contract tracers. Mask up and keep them safe and keep everyone in the community that's serving us daily. Beautiful art by Samuel Rodriguez. You can still get your test. Vote. This is a beautiful piece of vote artwork from Alexandra Bloom, who did an event with us last week. We thank our friends for all the wonderful things they do for us and support us. You can also now buy Viva related books. You can pick up the City One book. They have an online bookstore. All right, I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to do a quick introduction. So today you are indeed here for California Native Plant Society's Shade Gardening with California Native Plants. And Susan Karasof gardens in San Francisco clay soil. She is a member of the California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena chapter. Susan brings a system approach to build resilient local ecosystems, and only the easiest plants survive approach to gardening. Susan grows a buffet of native, edible, and pollinator plants. Welcome, Susan and Bob in our background. I am gonna mute and disappear.
Hi, this is Susan Karasof from the California Native Plant Society. Bob Hall from the California Native Plant Society is monitoring the Zoom Q&A. So please put your questions into the Zoom Q&A, not the chat. And Anissa Malady from the San Francisco Public Library is monitoring the YouTube chat. This presentation is being recorded and it will be available on the San Francisco Public Library's YouTube channel. There's a lot of information, so you may want to review it afterwards, freeze frame and copy down the names of all the plants. So this will be available and it is being recorded. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to talk about the San Francisco native plants that thrive in shade. We'll talk about why plant native plants, and we'll talk about native plant shade plants. We'll talk about types of shade, deep shade plants, medium shade plants, a summary of the light shade plants, and we'll talk about shade plants for pots and containers. We'll talk about best practices for gardening for native shade plants and shady garden resources. So why plant native plants? Planting in San Francisco is complex, and native plants evolved here. The picture on the upper left shows all of the different soils in San Francisco. Just our 7 miles by 7 mile city has so many different kinds of soil. Beneath that are our 3 north-south running fog and wind belts. Even the sunnier eastern part of San Francisco is foggier and windier than the East Bay, so we all have different plants that evolved here. San Francisco has a high variation in monthly rainfall, both from month to month and within months. Our average rainfall is 20 inches, but that ranges from 7 inches, as little as 7 inches, to as much as 50 inches of rain a year, depending on whether or not we got any atmospheric rivers. Our native plants evolved here, so they are drought tolerant and they are ecosystem friendly. And our native plants are the base of our food web. Researchers have determined how many different butterfly and moths eat the leaves of the different kinds of plants, both native plants and introduced plants. Introduced plants are not native plants. Introduced plants are native somewhere else. Our native plants can support as many as over 300 different kinds of butterfly and moth caterpillars. Those caterpillars co-evolved with those plants. They have to eat those plant leaves to get the nutrients they need to then turn into butterflies. They can't use any other kind of plant. They can only use the plant leaves that they evolved with. And some of the plants that we have, some of our shade plants, support our local butterflies and moths. Our pink flowering currant, our huckleberry, our strawberries. So we'll talk about more of those when we get there. But keep in mind that when you plant local native plants, you're supporting your ecosystem. And when you plant introduced plants, not so much. 68% of San Francisco is paved and built on, so every plant we plant is an opportunity to support our ecosystem. So here are the guides for today's presentation. Because we have so many different kinds of soil, there are identifiers for clay soil, sandy soil, rocky soil, and loamy soil. Some of these plants are not drought tolerant. Some of them need a little bit of water, and those raindrops indicate whether or not they need damp soil throughout the rainy season. I mean, everyday damp soil, or if they need damp soil year round. So let's talk about native shade plants and types of shade. Plants evolve in plant communities, and those plant communities have layers. The tallest trees at the top, shorter trees, shrubs, shorter flowers, and ground covers. The plants in the lower layers get less light, and therefore they're naturally shade tolerant. So we'll be talking about some of these shorter plants that evolved getting less light, so they're just fine growing in shade. And plants evolved in plant communities. These are 5 of San Francisco's largest plant communities. All of those different soils and fog and rain and wind combined together with our plants and the insects and animals that evolved with them created these different plant communities. Oak woodlands, riparian, which is a fancy word for creekside, grasslands, coastal dune scrub, and dunes. These are the 5 top plant communities in San Francisco. Oak woodlands has a couple of different tall trees, oaks and bay laurels. The riparian and creekside have the taller willows, and the coastal dune scrub has got our hollyleaf cherry. All of those are fabulous, wonderful caterpillar plants, but they're the tallest plants in their communities, and so they need full sun. Everything else that evolved that's shorter than them can take some variation on shade. Let's talk about different types of shade. Deep shade and light shade are terms that are used within the plant community, and it can be difficult to figure out what that means. And I'm using medium shade, which I made up, because there turns out that there is another kind of shade in between them. So deep shade plants, they're really low in the understory, and they don't ever need any sun. I'm calling medium shade a plant that can survive really happily in deep shade, but it needs a little bit of sun sometime during the year to flower or fruit. So if you have no sun at all, you can still plant these plants and they'll be fine. They just may not ever flower or fruit, but they'll be perfectly happy living in your garden. Light shade plants are the plants that when I look at a plant on a website, if it says full sun and then part shade, then it means it's probably light shade. It means that it's right on the edge of that plant community, and it would prefer to get full sun, but it can do just fine with part shade. If it gets a little bit of sun early in the day or late in the day, or reflected sun from buildings and windows, it will still survive and it will flower or fruit. But if it doesn't get somewhat regular sun, then it won't do very well. So many of us have gardens that are shaded by buildings a few months out of the year. Those plants will still be okay. The light shade plants will still be all right if it's shaded a few months, but they absolutely positively need at some point during the year to get some regular daily sun. Deep shade plants. We have some beautiful plants that don't ever need any shade, any sun. They can just live in full shade. So we're going to start with the ground covers, because remember, in a plant community, that lowest understory plant probably doesn't need any sun at all. If you have a fruit and vegetable garden or would like an herb garden, 4 out of the 5 of these plants are edible. Our woodland strawberry, beautiful in no sun, full shade. Those strawberries have their DNA in our supermarket strawberries. Violet has delicious edible greens. Yerba buena, which is what our chapter of California Native Plant Society is named after, is an evergreen herb, very low growing, loves fog and wind, and tastes like a combination of oregano and a light mint. It's a beautiful plant. I've got it in my garden and I watch it just avoid ever being in sun. It just crawls over to the shady parts. Wild ginger is the heavy water user in this list. It needs year-round damp soil. If you're on top of one of San Francisco's buried creeks, it's going to be perfect there. The roots are edible and taste like a spicy hot ginger. It's a wonderful plant. Creeping snowberry does beautifully in deep dark shade, gorgeous pink flowers. Its berries are not edible. I've heard that someone described the berries as tasting like ivory soap. So yeah, don't plant creeping snowberry for the food. But the other four, you can put those in your edible garden because you can grow an edible native garden in shade. Here are some of our shorter flowers. So they're taller than the ground covers, but they're still relatively short, under a couple of feet. Many of these happen to need water, and a few of them need what's called loamy soil. We'll discuss soil types later. The loam soil is where you can add additions like compost, and that plant will still be happy. Meadow rue, bleeding heart, tallama, hound's tongue, they're gorgeous. They all need some extra water. These come from the riparian or creekside plant community, and they evolved with a lot more water than most of than most of San Francisco's plants. The columbine, there's a gradient from the bottom of a creek up a hill or towards the drier section. The columbine likes being near the creek. It would like some extra water, but it's drought tolerant. I grow it and it does just fine and with no additional water. And it's absolutely gorgeous and a hummingbird favorite. San Francisco has native ferns. Two of those native ferns are drought tolerant. Two of them need water. The bottom two, the western sword fern and the California polypody, would like to have some water. They evolved near that creek and riparian area. But coastal wood fern and coffee fern, those are understory ferns for the oak woodland, and they do fine with a lot of shade and no additional water. You need to add water to help them get along as you would with any newly planted plant, but they don't need water for very long. We have a few grasses that can take quite a bit of shade. Most of our grassland is full sun. These grasses are either riparian for the western ryegrass and the scouring rush horsetail, the two on the right, with that fabulous architectural look on the scouring rush horsetail. They do need regular water, but we do have one that evolved in the oak woodlands, and it does just really well in summer drought and no additional water. We have some drought tolerant understory shrubs: snowberry, pink flowering currant, and coffeeberry. Pink flowering currant is one of the most valuable shrubs that you can add to your landscape. It blooms from December to February with gorgeous pink flowers and is one of the few plants that blooms during the winter time. So it's a valuable and necessary source of nectar for hummingbirds and bees. It's got edible berries, it does beautifully in full shade, and it's a gorgeous plant. So all kinds of reasons to plant that. Snowberry comes in both the ground cover version that we discussed earlier and a taller version. Very easy to grow. Beautiful pink flowers, does fabulously in deep shade. Coffeeberry is amazing. Coffeeberry does well in deep, full, never get any sun shade, all the way to full sun. And it does well in most of our soils. So it's a bulletproof plant. Evergreen, Berries aren't edible, but it's a fantastic bird plant to have in your garden. So here's the medium shade area. This is where I made up this word. It means that it can handle deep shade, but it would like some sun to be able to flower or fruit. If you want to have an herb garden in your shady garden, we have 2 more plants that do beautifully in deep shade. Monkeyflower savory on the left and hummingbird sage on the far right. Both wonderful plants, delicious. Monkeyflower savory, both the leaves and the flowers taste like mint. Hummingbird sage, the leaves taste like sage and the flowers taste like fruit punch. Both of these plants do beautifully in deep shade, but they do best if they can get a little bit of sun. I have heard of people who plant hummingbird sage underneath their deck and it lives for years, just waiting at some point, thinking it might get a little bit of sun. Coral bells in the middle are short. They're a shorter flower, but they're fantastically bulletproof in terms of shade. They can handle quite a bit of shade. They would like a little bit of sun to flower, just a little bit, sometime during the year. I've noticed with some of our courtyard gardens that the buildings will shade for months and months, but there might be a little bit of sun in June or July, or a little bit of sun reflecting off of buildings and windows. That's good enough for all 3 of these plants to flower and produce seed. Coral bells are a fantastic plant for bees, and it just blooms for months. We have a few vines in San Francisco that do beautifully in full shade, and they will grow towards some light. They will try to find some. California honeysuckle is gorgeous with that pink flower, very attractive to hummingbirds. And Dutchman's pipevine is very unusual. San Francisco is the southernmost tip of the area for Dutchman's pipevine. Dutchman's pipevine is the only plant that can be used as a caterpillar plant for the gorgeous pipevine swallowtail butterfly. It has that very unusual looking pipe-shaped flower in January and very, very soft leaves. It's a lot of fun to plant in the garden. It absolutely has to be planted in shade. I have planted it in sun and it will not live. It's got to be planted in shade. It will crawl up a trellis or a tree or a bush, and it will crawl across the ground as well. It's really fun to have in the landscape. It's pretty easy to keep in good shape, and I just really enjoy growing it. We have some more shrubs that do really well in deep shade and a little bit of sun to flower or fruit. The cream bush is beautiful, does well on a variety of soils, and it's got that fabulous white flower and it's scented. Thimbleberry is an interesting plant. It is in the raspberry family, and that berry is edible and tastes like no other berry you've ever tried. The berry is only ripe for one day when it's that fantastic red color. It's that beige color the day before, and it's shriveled up the next day. So get out there in the end of June and go eat your thimbleberry. Just buy one plant. It'll just fill up the area. It's a little bit aggressive, but it's a lot of fun to use, and it's fantastic for a children's garden. It's the only raspberry family member that I know of that doesn't have any thorns. So the leaves are really soft, no thorns. Because it grew all over my garden, I can assure you that it grows well in dry shade and damp shade and dry sun and damp sun. It grows everywhere. It flowered in dark, deep shade, but it did not fruit. So it definitely needs just a little bit of sun at some point to make sure that it will fruit. Huckleberry is a wonderful, fantastic deep shade plant. I've got it in deep, deep shade that gets a little bit of sun in June, and I end up getting both the flowers and the berries with just a little bit of summer solstice sun. Evergreen leaves, shiny evergreen leaves, really great for caterpillars. So definitely celebrate those chewed leaves when you see them. Coast barberry is another important ecosystem plant. It blooms from December through February. It supports fewer caterpillars than the pink flowering currant does, but it does provide a very long bloom period and that necessary nectar and pollen for winter hummingbirds and for bees. It's a wonderful plant. It can take deep shade, needs a little bit of sun to flower. I have planted it in absolute positive deep shade where it got no sun and it wasn't as happy as the ones that were planted just a little further away that got a little bit of sun. It can go all the way to full sun, so it's an easy plant to put in the garden. Very stunning looking, shiny evergreen leaves, very vibrant yellow flowers. We have some small trees, so keep in mind that these are smaller than the trees that are the tallest in their plant communities. California hazelnut produces edible hazelnuts. It does really well in deep shade with a tiny bit of summer solstice sun. The silk tassel bush is a really amazing bush. It loves wind and fog. Other plants in the coastal dune scrub community developed behind it, using it as a windbreak. It looks like a Christmas tree that got into the plate of Christmas cookies because it's got a very wide base in terms of its triangular shape. And it's got those very interesting tassels. So it always looks fabulous. And it's fantastic with wind and fog and deep, deep shade. Blue elderberry is another wonderful wildlife plant. Does beautifully in deep shade with just a tiny bit of summer solstice sun. Those leaves are deciduous, which means they fall off in the winter. They're beloved by caterpillars, very shallow flowers, beloved by insects, and those berries are delicious for both people and birds. Let's talk late shade. So this is just a summary of some of the plants that we have in San Francisco that can handle light shade. In theory, we have plants that need full sun. These need some sun during the year and some daily sun during the year, but they can handle some shade at some point during the year. So they'll still survive. We have short flowers, we've got grasses, we've got small trees, we've got shrubs. We have all kinds of flowers that evolved right on the edge of that plant community. And so the flowers that we have pictures of here are that yellow one is the gumweed, the pink one is the seaside daisy, that pink hedge with the hummingbird is our malvarosa. It's a wonderful hedge. I've seen it grow in deep shade, but everything I've read said that it needs some sun. So let's go ahead and err on the side of caution and make sure that it gets a little bit of sun at some point. It's a wonderful hummingbird plant. And then coyote bush, which is just a bulletproof plant. Boy, is that thing drought tolerant and wonderful in terms of being fall blooming and wonderful for insects, wonderful and important for insects. Although it would prefer full sun, I have seen it growing in quite a bit of shade. So that's a very trustworthy plant. Let's talk about the shade plants that you can grow in containers. If what you have are window boxes or pots on a north-facing balcony, we have a couple of different kinds of plants that thrive in just short amounts of soil. Annuals are plants that live their entire lifetime in 1 year. They are going to live fast and die young. The rain they get is the rain they get. All of these are incredibly drought tolerant because they live such a short life where they grow, they flower to attract some bees, which is why most of them are just gorgeous. And then they go to seed, leaving that seed for the birds, hoping to get onto some soil so that they can live again the next year. They don't put a lot of effort into their root systems. Short, stubby little root systems are perfect for pots and window boxes and containers. We've got the Collinsia with that gorgeous purple color. All of our annual phacelias are gorgeous blue-purple plants, do beautifully in pots, do beautifully in shade. Farewell to Spring is our one Clarkia that does well in quite a bit of shade, and it's got a fantastic array of colors. They're sort of azalea colors where they've got those warm pinks. Miner's lettuce is the easiest plant to grow in San Francisco. It prefers full dark shade. It's fine drought tolerant. It's fine with some dampness. It grows all the way down to San Diego, so it can handle very, very little rain. And it's our delicious winter lettuce. So it's perfect for not only for containers, but also for vegetable and edible gardens. Everything that grows in a pot or a container will also grow really well in the sand, in soil, any kind of soil. Actually, these are very hardy plants. Bulbs are also wonderful in containers. Bulbs are like an onion. That's the underground part, and everything else is above ground. So if it's short like an onion or even shorter, it's going to do beautifully in a pot or a window box or any kind of container. These are the beautiful plants that we have that do well in shade. Blue dix, the Mariposa lily, blue-eyed grass, and the Douglas iris. The Douglas iris comes in a variety of colors. It's a very easy plant to grow in quite a bit of shade. Mariposa lily, I have to warn you, people get addicted to this plant. It comes in all kinds of colors, all kinds of shapes. It's gorgeous. All of the blue dix family, the blue-eyed grass family, and the Douglas iris family, those are all shade tolerant and drought tolerant. The Mariposa lily, they are not all shade tolerant. So be sure that if you have a shady pot, that you double check the Mariposa lily and make sure that it will handle some shade. They're gorgeous, they're addictive, they're a lot of fun. Let's talk about best practices for gardening for native shade plants. We'll talk about when to plant in San Francisco, which is during the rainy season, and determining your soil type. Plants in California evolved to grow their root systems during the rainy season so that they can survive our summer drought. So be sure to plant during the rainy season when they are expecting to work on their root systems, as opposed to just hoping for rain. So later in the spring, not as good a time to plant. Plant sometime between November and February, and that will give you the best success for getting our native plants to live and thrive. So there's a lot of discussion on how you determine your soil type, but you don't have to hire an expensive geologist. Take a large cup of water and a pointy object like a screwdriver outside with you. Use the pointy object to dig into your soil. If your soil chips off into sharp sections, then it's rocky soil. And it's either serpentine or chert. Yes, we have two different kinds of rocky soil in San Francisco. So rub some of the soil between your fingers. If it feels grainy, it might be sand. Pour some of the water on the soil. And I'm talking about during the dry season now. Right now, sand is not going to accept a lot of water. So when you pour the water onto the sand, it may just hang out there for a while before it slowly sinks in. If your soil feels clumpy, it might be clay. Pour some of the water on the soil. If the water pools and then spreads and then sinks, it might be clay. We don't get the kind of meniscus that we get with the sandy soil, where it just hangs out, where the water just hangs out there like a big old water droplet with the edges all defined. It will sink very slowly though, because the clay soil is also trying to protect itself with a little bit of a layer on top to avoid losing any more water through transpiration. If your soil feels like soft cake crumbs, it may be loam. Traditional gardening books and British gardening books extol the virtues of loam. It turns out that San Francisco has some native loam. So if you have loamy soil, good for you. You can grow a lot of plants. Pour some of the water in the soil. If the water sinks right in, it's probably loam. So this is an easy way of determining what your soil probably is. Also take a look at the plants that grow around it. Look those plants up, see what kind of soil those plants need. Let's talk about shady garden resources. There are a variety of things to help you choose the right plant. We've got plant lists on the California Native Plant Society website, CalScape, which is California Native Plant Society's state level plant selection tool. Sources for native plants, native plant books, and iNaturalist, which is a wonderful free citizen science application to help explore local plants and wildlife. Our local chapter of the California Native Plant Society, the Yerba Buena chapter, named after that delicious fog-loving herb. We have a bunch of resources in our biodiversity folder. So we've got butterfly lists and bee lists and hummingbird lists and edible plant handouts, all of which can help you choose how you're going to feed your ecosystem and yourself. The California Native Plant Society state level tool CalScape is wonderful. They've got an option to just choose plants for shade. Their radius is 10 miles. Remember that San Francisco is 7 miles by 7 miles with all that different shade. So you want to make sure you check your soil type for any plant they recommend. And if the plant isn't the kind, can't tolerate the kind of soil that you've got, no matter how pretty it is, don't get it. I've done a lot of planting wonderful plants that didn't like my soil type. CalScape also includes nurseries on one of their tabs, so you can find out where to purchase these plants, as well as the annuals and the bulbs. CalFlora is another wonderful tool. They include bloom period, as well as a plant list for shade. They can give you the opportunity to toggle the low water on and off with shade. That riparian, again, is a fancy word for creekside, or it needs a lot of water. Bloom period is very helpful if what you want to put together is a year-round set of flowers for you to enjoy and for hummingbirds to decide they want to come and live with you, and for bees to come and decide they want to live in your garden year-round. CalFlora is very helpful with that. There are a bunch of wonderful California gardening books. California Wildlife Habitat Garden is a great book about attracting wildlife to your garden. And there are a couple of wonderful books written that include Plant Communities, California Plants by Matt Ritter, and Designing California Native Gardens. If you've got a larger space, designing and installing plants that were in plant communities together helps all those different plants survive our varied weather patterns. If you just have a little bit of space, garden for your ecosystem, but it'll be okay if you focus on what works well in your space. Doug Tallamy is the researcher who did the original work on how many leaves how many caterpillar species for butterflies and moths are supported by different plants. And he was shocked to discover that native plants were so important to the caterpillar species, and also shocked to discover just how many caterpillars it takes to feed a nest of baby birds. He and his graduate students determined that it takes between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars to feed one nest of baby birds. So it's really important that we plant for caterpillars in our gardens. It will help us keep birds. Birds spread different seeds of plants, and that's how we manage to continue to have plants provide us air and water as well as food. Doug Tallamy, who is based at the University of Delaware, has done a couple of California lectures for the California Native Plant Society, one for Northern California and one for Southern California, and those are available on YouTube. iNaturalist is a wonderful free citizen science application to help explore the plants near you as well as the wildlife. You can discover where these different plants are growing and go and see them for yourself. We have so many beautiful parks and open spaces. It's a wonderful opportunity to go and explore the plants and the wildlife near you. It's a really really fun tool to use. I want to say thank you to all of the people who provided photos on iNaturalist and the professionals. I could not have done this presentation without their beautiful work. This has been a third in a series of 3 presentations for the San Francisco Public Library by the California Native Plant Society. We discussed edible native fruits and vegetables of San Francisco in July. We talked about gardening for San Francisco's butterflies and pollinators in August. This was shade gardening with California native plants here in September. These are all available on the San Francisco Public Library's YouTube channel. And Anissa has asked us to come back and do some additional presentations. The next one is scheduled for Saturday, October 24th at 1 o'clock as part of the Bay Area Science Festival, where we'll talk about biodiversity in San Francisco. and planting for biodiversity in San Francisco. We are the California Native Plant Society. We have free lectures, free hikes when it's not COVID, and we've got an upcoming fall planting webinar on October 4th, where that will be available on YouTube as well as Zoom. We have biodiversity resources on our website and a place to sign up for that October 4th fall planting webinar. That's the third item to click down on our calendar. And we have a YouTube channel as well, as do many of the other California Native Plant Society chapters. Santa Clara Valley's got a wonderful, wonderful YouTube channel with, they've been recording their webinars for years. Marin also does, as does the East Bay. So check out the variety of different kinds of information that are available on these YouTube channels. So thank you all for being here this Saturday. It's time to take your questions from the Zoom Q&A and from the YouTube chat. What kind of questions do we have on the Zoom Q&A? Would I please consider suggesting cool, shady plants, preferably with flowers of variegated? So variegated is a really bad idea. Variegated leaves look really pretty, but it means that those leaves have been engineered or selected to have a different kind of color. And Doug Tallamy's recommendation is to always choose leaves with the original color of the leaf. Those colors represent the kinds of chemicals that the caterpillar moms are, that the butterfly mothers are looking for their caterpillars to eat. Would I please discuss indoor irrigation solutions for individual pots? I am a Darwinian gardener. I can't get anything to live indoors. If there is somebody else who knows about irrigation solution for pots indoors, if they would please add some information to the Q&A, that would be wonderful. What container plants will rats not eat? That is a really good question, and I don't have that information. Iris is pretty toxic, so I would try iris, the Douglas iris, and see if they won't eat that. Native plants best suited for underneath native oak trees. Thank you for having a native oak tree. We have a bunch of native plants that co-evolved underneath our oak trees. Most of the ones that we talked about here that can manage clay soil will also do well underneath an oak tree. So the yerba buena plant, the strawberries, the woodland strawberries specifically will do well. Yes, some of these plants, you have a question about some of these plants you recognize as local to Southern California as well. They are. That blue elderberry grows all the way down to San Diego. Miner's lettuce all the way down to San Diego. And as far as I know, it grows all the way up to the Oregon border. So we do share some of the same plants. It's fascinating. Certainly some of those plant families are really similar. The pink flowering currant down in Southern California is a different variety, but it's still in the ribes family. So we share a lot of the same ones. Ooh, you can grow hummingbird sage all the way down there. It's a wonderful plant. It is the only California native sage that can survive some shade. All of the other 88 California native sages need full sun. And it's really good to hear that you can grow hummingbird sage because it is delicious. Are any of the shade plants pet safe? Alex, I don't know what you mean by pet safe. I don't know what your pets do to your plants. They should all be pet safe unless the pets want to dig them up and eat them, and in which case anything that's edible for you is likely safe for your pet. I'm not sure I would consider iris particularly pet safe if they want to dig them up and eat them. In terms of getting bees or other pollinators, our native bees are very, very docile. They're very sweet. So you won't ever have a problem with bees and your pets. I'm thinking dogs. I've never seen a cat interact with any kind of insect unless it was some sort of dying butterfly, in which case it's fine. Honeybees are more aggressive, and the wasps that we have that have been introduced are also more aggressive. But again, I have not seen an issue with honeybees or even wasps with any pets. If anybody else has seen an issue with pets, if you could please let us know in the Zoom Q&A, that would be very helpful. It's wonderful to have the larger community here. It helps us all learn from each other. So how do I address critter contamination of edible shaded plants? You have to wash everything. Everything is going to have critter contamination on your berries and your leaves and even the roots. So everything's got to be washed just like you would wash something carefully to feed it from the grocery store. Are there any shade plants that I'm showing that are toxic to dogs, cats, or other small animals? Again, iris it's not going to kill them, but it will make them ill if they decide they want to eat an iris root. And the snowberry berries, I hear they taste like ivory soap, which sounds pretty nasty, but whoever told me they tasted like ivory soap managed to eat it and survive. I haven't seen a problem with toxins. It's not like oleander where it's really bad for your pets. Would I please suggest plants including edible and flowering for sand and clay by the sea? Certainly. So everything that was in this presentation that says sand is going to do well by the sea. Silk tassel is the absolute best thing to put out by the sea. It loves salt spray, it loves fog, it loves wind, and it'll help protect the rest of your plants. And what I discussed, ground cover for outdoor patios and small yards. Absolutely, those earlier ground covers. So your Ribena and, well, the ginger, if you've got the dampness for it, the creeping snowberry, the strawberries. Beach strawberry does well in sand, and the woodland strawberry does well both in sand and in clay. And the violets, although the violets are summer deciduous, so you're not going to get a continuous ground cover with that. But all of those do really well for outdoor patios and small gardens. I have all of them, and because I wanted to experiment, and they're all beautiful. Are any of these plants invasive? So the one plant that is a little bit invasive, I call it aggressive really, is thimbleberry, and you have been warned. I've watched it, watched its little rhizomes go underneath a concrete pathway and come up the other side. So the only one that's invasive is the thimbleberry. At some point, you could actually take them out and give them away to people, which is what I was doing when I was able to grow thimbleberry. It's a really fun plant. You've been warned. Oh, rose, good. So Southern California has many currants and coffeeberry. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, you've got different currants than we do, the ribes. It's good to hear that coffeeberry lives all the way down there. It's such a great plant. Arthur, you live in Walnut Creek. You've got a drier climate and very clay soils. Would love to know which of these work here. California Native Plant Society has an East Bay chapter. They've got wonderful references, and they've got their own nursery, which we don't have here in Yerba Buena. It's called the Native Here Nursery. It's across the street from the Tilden Botanic Garden, and they've got a wonderful online plant selection tool that will help you determine what will do really well there. Basically, anything in this presentation that wants fog or wind or water isn't going to do well in Walnut Creek. The rest of them should all do fine. I know for certain that you've got the same flowering currant that we do, plus you've got a few extra ribes that we don't have. So you've got some extra really gorgeous plants that do well in shade. Definitely check the Native Here Nursery website and the California Native Plant Society East Bay chapter website. Michelle, can pink flowering currants grow underneath redwood trees? That is a good question. As far as I know, they can. I haven't seen them in redwoods. I've seen thimbleberry underneath redwoods. That's that plant we were talking about, that I was talking about, that's a little bit invasive. But did I mention those berries are edible and delicious? I don't know if it can grow underneath redwoods. I would check the California Native Plant Society CalScape website, look for redwoods and see if it's one of the plants that's associated with the redwood tree. The redwood has its own plant community. In fact, there's 2 different redwoods, so they have 2 different plant communities, the coastal redwoods and the Sierra redwoods. They have their own plant communities. I haven't seen ribes growing there, the pink flowering currant. It's worth a try. Have I seen it? Oh, I have, actually. Thank you for asking. This is at the San Francisco Golden Gate Park, the Striving Arboretum and Botanic Garden. They've got ribes growing underneath their redwoods, so they're coastal redwoods, as well as the delicious ginger. They both grow really well under there. So what plants would I recommend for under a freeway bridge? Jean, yes, I'm working on pulling that plant list together for you. You're the one who's planning on serpentine underneath a freeway bridge. Go for the deep shade plants. Not even, you could go the medium shade, just keep in mind they won't ever flower, and only choose the ones that are right for your soil. And Jean, I think you've got serpentine soil, so I'm very interested in, it's one of the things that drove my interest for putting this presentation together. So go back and look at the deep shade. If it needs water, don't put it underneath the freeway, and be sure to select for your soil. JK, you're asking, are all the native plants discussed today animal friendly, unlike lady slippers? Ooh, I did not know that lady slippers were an issue. That's good to know. As far as I know, it's everything except the iris. And could I run through all the little icons on the slide? Some of them are clear and some of them are not. Sure, let me go back to that. Oops. I can get back to icons. The intention of the icons is to help determine which of these plants does well in different kinds of soil, because we have so many different kinds of soil in San Francisco. We have clay soil, we have sandy soil, we have rocky soil, including the serpentine and the chert in the rocky soil, and we have loam soil. The damp soil is that single raindrop. That needing the damp soil year round is a double raindrop. We actually have more plants than this that can tolerate shade. I tried to reduce the number of double raindrop plants, knowing that most of us don't have an underground stream to help keep things damp. Oh, talk about the water routine to get some of these plants established. Maria, thank you for asking that question. Plant during the rainy season. Put water in the hole when you dig the hole. Put the plant on top of it, water it every day until you get some rain, and then water every 3 days for the first month or so. As long as you're continuing to get rain. You don't have to water if you got rain within 3 days. You can pull back to once a week, but definitely water once a week through that first summer to make sure that all of those plants get enough summer water to grow their root systems. Bulbs absolutely have to have a dry summer, so stop watering if you've got pots. Don't water in July and August. Make sure that your bulbs have got that resting period. And the annuals may continue to bloom if you continue to water them, but they'll do fine if you water or don't water. Annuals are very, very easy. Keegan, you're thinking of planting some plants in medium shade. It would be under an Australian bush cherry tree, which makes a lot of duff. Are there any shrubs you recommend that can survive in somewhat heavy duff? And do I think silk tassel would do well? I don't know the Australian bush cherry tree at all. The few non-native, the few introduced plants that I know are all edible. So if the Australian bush cherry tree were edible, I might know it, but I don't. Most of these plants do well with duff. In fact, they really like it. Redwoods don't, but we cannot and should not and do not naturally grow redwoods here in San Francisco. There are a few people that have them, but they'll grow well in duff, but they won't grow from seed in duff. They actually require They require fire to clear out all the duff and then have the seeds germinate. We have a few plants that require that, which is another reason. There's a full shade, full sun plant called California lilac. It is another plant that only grows well if there's been fire. The silk tassel bush should be okay. Does anybody else know this? Who's in this community know the Australian bush cherry tree? I have not personally grown a silk tassel bush. The ones that I have seen have a lot of duff on the ground. Most of them are good with that. Christine, how to distinguish a nightshade weed versus the natives to keep? That is such a good question. We have native nightshade. I didn't include it because I know that it can be dangerous for pets. There are a couple of tools that you can use. CalScape can help you key out. It's called using a key. There's the Jepson manual can help you use a key and provide a key to look at the leaf and the flower. And CalFLORA can help with that. So there are some tools. I tend to take out nightshade just because it's not an edible plant and it is a dangerous plant. Let's see. Would I discuss deer and rodent tolerant plants? So JK, look on the CalScape side and the Las Politas side. They both discuss deer tolerant plants. Because we don't have a lot of deer problems here in San Francisco, because we don't have a lot of deer, we have coyotes. That's sort of as big as we get in terms of wildlife. And coyotes aren't herbivores. You want to make things as friendly as possible for coyotes because they love to eat rodents. Rodents are their favorite snack. But CalScape and Las Politas both discuss which plants are deer proof. Iris is probably deer proof because it's poisonous. It won't kill you poisonous, but will make you very sick poisonous. Milena, you've got, do the pot plants also live in sandy soil? Yes, they do. There are a lot of great annuals for sandy soil. Go to the CalScape site and look for annuals. There are those Chinese houses, the Collinsia do especially well there. There's another great plant called red nades that's edible, does well in sandy soil. So the CalScape site will help you and the Larner Seeds site will help. Both Larner Seeds does primarily annuals. They're a wonderful place to go get information on which seeds do well in which soil. Annie's Annuals carries both native and introduced plants, and they carry a lot of annuals. They'll also have information on their website. Debbie, can I recommend a place to buy Mariposa lily from seed or seedling? That is a great question. I only know about places to buy it as a bulb. I am a terrible gardener and can grow very few things from seed. And miner's lettuce and Clarkia, I can grow those from seed, but I haven't tried to grow Mariposa lily from seed. You might consider reaching out on one of the California Native Plant Society chat sites. Kip McMichael, who's one of our experts on the Mariposa lily, lives over in the East Bay, and he may already have answered that question over on one of the California Native Plant Society East Bay presentations. Oh, you want a place in San Francisco to buy Mariposa lily seeds? I don't know. I buy my bulbs and annuals online for the most part. So I can get them from Larner Seeds. There are places that just specialize in bulbs. There's Telios Rare Bulbs, and I think there's Far West Bulbs. Both carry a lot of bulbs, including the Mariposa lilies. I just get them in the mail. It's easier for me. Ooh, Patricia, what plant shop do I recommend in San Francisco? Those are fighting words, and I am not a good representative of the California Native Plant Society if I recommend just one plant shop. We do have the Bay Natives plant nursery here in San Francisco over near Heron's Head Park. There are a bunch of other great native plant nurseries in the East Bay and Marin in the South Bay. I would check their inventory and take a look at their ease of use. I have been known to buy plants in the East Bay East Bay Wilds and Peatvilliers have been very helpful and very good to me. They've got an enormous selection of plants, and Pete knows a lot about edible plants, and my passion is edible native plants, that Venn diagram between what's edible for me and what's native. And so I buy a lot of plants from Pete. So Cece, are the bulbs mentioned also to be planted during the rainy season? Yes. As far as every bulb I've ever planted, I've also planted during the rainy season. You might be able to get away with buying and installing them a little bit earlier, say October, but regular plants, you want to wait until November. But bulbs, you could go ahead and try it just a little bit earlier, but it's going to be best. They expect the same rainy and drought pattern that the rest of our plants expect. JK, how are native plants being affected by the wildfire smoke and particulates? Plants breathe through their leaves, and so they're being choked. It's terrifying. There was just a presentation on wildfire and birds that the Golden Gate Audubon Society did, and that's on their YouTube channel now. Valerie, are any of these plants less attractive to gophers? That's a really good question. We've had some questions on that too at our webinars. I don't know of that. Does anybody else know of plants that are less attractive to gophers? If so, please add it to the Q&A, as well as the less attractive to deer and less attractive to rats. Please add those. Layla, you have a container garden using potting soil from the nursery. What kind of soil is this? Yes, it's loamy soil. Nurseries sell almost exclusively loamy soil because so many introduced plants expect it. Rick, if you're planting an older existing bed, I'm assuming the soil has at least partially been amended. Do I have planting tips about whether or how to amend or avoid amending the soil that you're planting? He knows that there are cautions about creating loamy buckets in a dense clay soil, but he's not sure what to do to improve success for a transplant. I am a very lazy gardener. I don't amend my soil. There are soils in San Francisco that have been amended, you're right, with an older bed. Choosing a plant that does well with both clay and loamy soil is going to make you very, very successful. Very few plants depend on just clay soil. They usually have at least a couple of soils that they got used to. I don't personally add compost. I do know people who have added compost to native plants when they plan to amend it in clay, but I don't personally do that. And it's not a good idea in sand. The plants that are used to sand really just need to go into sand. The first website before the CalFlora website is the California Native Plant Society CalScape website. So let's take another look at that. It's a very useful website. They've got lots of great new information about butterflies. Right there, CalScape. So, are there any Central Coast Monterey Native Plant Society resources? There are. Your California Native Plant Society chapter is the Santa Clara Valley chapter, and they are wonderful. They have all kinds of helpful information on their website, including their wonderful YouTube channel. So, JK, thanks for the warning about the variegation. What about variegated hostas? So hostas are not native here, so they're not going to support any of our native insects. Please limit the non-native plants. If you absolutely just adore something, go for it. But if you could have primarily natives, that's what's going to produce the host plants for your butterflies, and that's what's going to feed the rest of your ecosystem. Etoria, you ask about what are the best plants to have indoors and would it be the same as the deep shaded plants? Does anybody else know about indoor plants? I've never been successful at growing indoor plants. Stacy, you're asking for deer resistant flowers under oak trees. Again, if somebody in the community knows, that would be wonderful. Linda, the best soil to use for container shade plants. If it's on the roof, it needs to be sand because it needs to be as light as possible. If it's not on a roof, then you can use just regular nursery loamy soil. Whatever's easy to get. Ooh, Lisa, rabbit-resistant plants. I don't know. Does anybody else know about rabbit-resistant plants? Anne, can you grow lavender plants that smell nice? How about other medicinal plants like aloe vera? So I only know about native plants. There are some lovely scented native plants. There is the Philadelphus, which is the mock orange. There is the cream bush that we talked about earlier has got scent. There's Artemisia californica. It's a full sun plant, but it's got scented leaves and it's medicinal. There are a couple of places to go for edible and medicinal information. Daniel Mormon's Native American Ethnobotany is the primary source. I talked about that in the edible native plants presentation back in July. The library's got that for, got the book for that for the food plants. The larger book has got both food and medicinal plants. He also has a website if you want to look at one plant at a time. It's helpful to know your local tribe, and our local tribe is the Ohlone. The other site for medicinal plants is Dr. David Duke's website that the USDA funded back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and it's a wonderful plant. It's a wonderful site. It will help you with medicinal plants. I only know our native plants, so I can't help you with lavender. Andrew, are there certain plants that grow in the dry shade of a very large manzanita bush? Well, congratulations for having a very large manzanita bush. That's just going to be fabulously beautiful. I'm so happy for you. That's a wonderful plant. Yeah, all of the plants that look, that are, well, it depends on which kind of manzanita you have and what kind of soil you have. If you've got, there are manzanitas that are adapted to sand, manzanitas that are adapted to serpentine, manzanitas that are adapted to clay. So check your soil type and then go back to those light shade plants and choose one of those. It depends on how big it is. They would need to be really big for our very, very deep shade plants to be happy there. And you have hard pan clay soil underneath the eaves of your north-facing backyard. Any suggestions for how to plant there and a good ground cover? Yes, absolutely. We have the same. I have hard pan clay soil. So go back to the deep shade and choose any one of those ground covers. They will all be really beautiful on hard pan clay, north-facing. Yerba buena, the violets, the creeping snowberry, and the strawberry, they'll all do beautifully. If it's hard pan clay and you don't have dampness, that avoid the ginger. And they're all good ground covers. The strawberry isn't a dense ground cover, so it's nice to mix those. Lee, the slides showed the soil types and water needs of the plants listed. Do I have a list of the plants named in the presentation that includes this information? I pulled most of this information from CalScape and from Las Politas for a couple of things that were specific about soil. I also used the biodiversity resources that we have on our California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena site. Between all of those different resources, and CalFlora's got a nice shade plant choice tool as well. I haven't put all of this into a written document, but I see that that's necessary, so I will do that, and then I will have that posted to our website, the California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena website. Ooh, can vaccinium be made into a bonsai? Ooh, Joanne, what a great idea. Go for it. Why not? It's a lovely plant. I don't know which native plants would do well with bonsai. Most of them have very deep root systems because they need to survive our dry summers. Has anybody else bonsai'd a native? Ooh, Janet, columbine is not pet safe. Thank you. Did not know that. JK, what do I use to wash the edible plants that I eat? Honestly, I just use water. Maybe I should use something else, but I haven't done that. Ooh, Anna, check with the SPCA plant site for toxicity to cats and dogs. Thank you. That's a wonderful idea. Constance, you've got a question for rabbits outside the geranium family. Again, we're going to need to have someone else answer their rabbit questions. Andrea, snowberries have saponin, which is poisonous. Some people won't eat them, but other groups call them ghost berries. And they won't eat them. Great. There must be some reason it tastes like ivory soap. Yeah, don't eat snowberries. If anyone thinks I said that you should, no, please don't do that. And Andrea, thank you for making that very, very clear. Bad idea to eat snowberries. Valerie, you have a lot of maple trees without much ground cover underneath, and you're having difficulty planting anything due to the crowded roots. Can I recommend a ground cover that can deal with root-bound soil in the shade? Try the violets and try the miner's lettuce. Miner's lettuce has just got those tiny little roots. You'll only end up with, I mean tiny, maybe 1.5 inches. Miner's lettuce grows everywhere on everything. It's wonderful and it's delicious. It is summer deciduous, so it will go away as soon as the rain stop or as soon as you stop irrigating. But it's a fantastic ground cover for someplace where you've got roots that are really close to the soil. Anonymous, dogs will sometimes chase and catch flies, sky raisins, and bees, spicy sky raisins, and get stung. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's really good to know. And that's a hilarious way of talking about bees. I'm wondering if those are honeybees or native bees, because I haven't seen native bees associate themselves with any of the dogs that have visited our garden. One thing that can be done is to use just a short, lightweight fencing to keep the dogs away from the bee-friendly plants. I plant primarily edibles and for bees, and have yet to have any of our visiting dogs have an issue with them. But thank you for letting me know that there are dogs that will chase flies and bees. And Anonymous, where can these plants be mail ordered for shut-ins? Absolutely understand. Las Bolitas does mail order, and I believe a lot of the other native plants nurseries do as well. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we do have some other native plant nurseries here. We have Sutra's Stewards. We have a wonderful San Bruno Mountain Watch has got the San Bruno Mission Blue Nursery, another couple of great places to go. I would look on their websites. They'll tell you whether or not they'll do mail-ins. But there are definitely places that will. I'm absolutely certain Las Bolitas does. JK, what kind of plants would grow under strawberry trees? Strawberry trees are most of the strawberry trees, the arbutus that we have here in San Francisco, are from Europe. There is an East Bay version, the Arbutus innuendo, Unedo, I think. All kinds of things grow underneath it. I've seen them in parks, and I've seen native plants growing underneath. Because they tend to be pruned like a lollipop, there's a lot of sun available underneath. So go to any of those light shade plants and they'll do just fine. Lisa, is adobe soil considered clay? You're in Santa Rosa. Yes, adobe is clay. Good question. Lori, what native plants can you plant underneath redwood? So go to this CalScape site, choose the kind of redwood that you've got. You've either got a coast redwood or a Sierra redwood, and look for the companion plants at the bottom, and all of those will do really well. Vivian, what would I recommend to plant underneath tall fruit trees? So avocado and persimmon. If they're taller and they're sort of pruned high up, so they're not shrubby, then you can go with any of the light shade plants. They should all just do fine. Avocados and persimmons both tend to have sandy soil or well-draining soil, so choose a plant that likes well-draining or sandy soil. You can look at the light shade list and then go check the CalScape site for the soil needs. Carrie, any recommendations for shade plants to put underneath a huge avocado tree? I actually have had a huge avocado tree. They do produce a lot of shade. If it's clay, go for Yerba Buena. Will avoid your sun. It'll just creep away from it. The strawberry will do really well. Native strawberry will do well. Double check your soil type to see if you've got sand or clay. But the woodland strawberry should do beautifully, as will the Yerba Buena. The violets will probably also do well, and you should be able to grow miner's lettuce there too. Do I have any suggestion on native shaded fruit trees? Meyer lemons hate your yard. So I hear you, JK. Meyer lemons need a lot of sun. Lemons, in fact, all citrus needs a lot of sun. Yes, so take a look back in the presentation. There is a fabulous blue elderberry tree that does really well. It's, what else do we have? The California hazelnut does really well. It's a nut tree, not a fruit tree, but it's still pretty wonderful. The huckleberry will eventually get really large, but it will take a while. They really work on their root system for a long time. It's not a tree so much as a bush. It will eventually get to 10 feet, but mine is 12 years old and it's finally gotten to 4 feet. So it grows really slowly. It's wonderful though. Ooh, Lisa. ASPCA, poisonous plants, pet care, animal poison control, and plant list. Oh, thank you, Lisa. JK, I'm not sure that was enough of an answer on shaded fruit trees. What else do I have? And the strawberries. Strawberries also do really well. Lisa, double check the Calscape. You should be able to find a list of nurseries that provide the bulbs for a Mariposa lily. And JK, which nursery is Pete Bilieu at? Yes, edible native shaded plants. It is East Bay Wilds. It's in Oakland. Wonderful. And he is also going to be speaking on container plants at our October 4th California Native Plant Society webinar, fall planting webinar. Oh, Virginia, beach strawberry and Douglas iris are great with gophers. Oh, thank you, Virginia. Oh, Anne, shade plants that grow well in rock walls. Take a look at those bulbs and the blue-eyed grass does really well in rock walls. And take a look at plants that looked for rocky soil. They'll be able to establish themselves pretty well. Valerie, any recommendation for native plants that grow quickly in areas burned by wildfires? Yes, that is a very long list. So the California Native Plant Society at the state level has a fire recovery guide. So if you'll search for that in your search engine of choice, California Native Plant Society, fire recovery guide, they've got an entire list. And so I'm so sorry to hear that you experienced fire on your land. There are plants that will help. Thomas, piggyback plant, popular houseplant in the 70s, is an Oregon native plant. Really? So perhaps it's also found in northern California. One of the fun things about both CalFlora and Calscape is that you can use them to find out what the range is for a plant. So go take a look at that. Oregon has got more huckleberry varieties than we do, and they've got more strawberry varieties than we do. They've got a lot of wonderful edible plants. Patricia, is moss native? Oh, yes. Yes, there absolutely is native moss. Keep in mind that it is summer deciduous like so many of our plants, like the violet, so it will go away. I've got it just showing up all by itself in my garden during the winter time. Winter rains, I get moss showing up in between the stones in my garden. There is a chapter of the California Native Plant Society called the Lichen Society, and they will have information on moss. There have been a couple of moss lectures. one for the Santa Clara Valley chapter on their YouTube channel, and one that I think is on our Yerba Buena channel. And they'll be able to help you get an idea of where to get some moss. You can also just get a hold of us and come take some moss out of my garden and transplant it to yours, and then it will grow really well. Assuming you're on clay. Sal, ooh, you saw Buckeye bonsai once. Oh, I can't even imagine how beautiful that is. Buckeye's got these large white flowers. It needs full sun and it's insanely poisonous, but it's good to know that it's bonsaiable. Arlene, you're not sure if this is native, but a rose that does well in shade is, I can't even pronounce that. It's a climbing rose and it's thornless. There is a native, one or two native roses. They are insanely thorny. I've heard that people plant them as hedges. I have not grown them. I'm not all that fond of thorns if something isn't edible. But it's good to know. Thank you for sharing a shade tolerant rose with us. Keegan, Prunus salicifolia, really, that's the holly leaf cherry, can tolerate some shade. It definitely makes edible fruits. I did not include it because it is the tallest plant in the coastal dune scrub community, but it's good to know that it can manage some shade. What do I think of California bay laurel bush as a potted tree? Well, go for it. That thing wants to be 30 feet tall. Those are delicious, unbelievably delicious, fruity bay leaves. And the nuts are insanely delicious. Go for it, give that a try. And then let us know how that worked, because it's a wonderful thing. I have heard of some restaurants that were growing them potted on a roof in, I think, Healdsburg, because they wanted to be able to use the bay leaves fresh, muddled in their drinks. And it was working for them. I don't know how soon it would be unhappy about being in a pot, but there's nothing like trying. In the meantime, you've got access to all those delicious leaves and maybe some of those delicious nuts. JK, what were the suggestions from Virginia? May be able to go back and look, I hope. Oh dear, am I not seeing them? I don't see them. I don't unfortunately see them. Lisa, do Mariposa lilies come back year after year like most bulbs do? And do they naturalize like daffodils do? Yes, they do. They come back year after year. They make the next year's bulb underneath it, so they prefer a somewhat deep pot. I've got mine planted in clay. I have found them easy to grow. I know that some other people have had some issues with them, but yeah, they come back year after year. Ooh, Andrea, you're recommending the Bryophyte chapter. Oh, I thought it was the Lichen chapter. It is the Bryophyte chapter for moss. Andrea Adams Morgan, thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful. Oh, Sal, yes. The California bay laurel is a reservoir for sudden oak death, as are camellias and azaleas. So definitely keep it away from oaks. But yeah, geez, it is delicious. Oh, Virginia. Oh, thank you for repeating that. Beach strawberry and Douglas iris are resistant to gophers. Do we have questions from the YouTube chat?
We do not, but we had lots of advice and lots of, not a lot of advice, but Artemis is a bonsaiable.
Oh, Artemisia? Oh.
Word today, bonsaiable.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful plant, and it's got